I think a lot of people find managing conflict in remote teams quite challenging, and distance doesn't silence tension. In fact, it can amplify it. Now, remote work doesn't necessarily eliminate the need to interact with these difficult people. It effectively just gives them a Wi-Fi connection and a mute button. And yet, conflict resolution in teams is often harder to spot and more difficult to resolve than on-site settings. So in this video, I wanted to give you 3 conflict-specific strategies that you can use to manage difficult conversations and tense dynamics in remote teams without resorting to a strategy along the lines of, oops, I forgot to invite you to the team meeting. So the first idea that I wanted to suggest was how to separate the person from the problem. It sounds easy, doesn't it? Like separate the person from their behavior, but actually this often makes quite a distinct difference in the way that conflict plays out. When someone rubs us the wrong way remotely, maybe they're too blunt or they're dominating conversations or video calls or something like that, it's easy to label them as difficult. But the mindset shift often comes for managers and team leaders, or even just if you're dealing with a colleague, when you can focus on the pattern instead of the personality. So instead of they're aggressive, or they're a difficult person, or they're just not a team player, focus on what they've actually done. So instead of Alex is aggressive, maybe it becomes something like, I've noticed that in team calls, Alex speaks over the top of others. Alex, I've noticed that when you're speaking, you often interrupt the person who might not have finished what they were saying. Could you let them finish what they were saying first before you respond? So this shift often helps us to stay more objective, and it helps us to give specific feedback and avoid the character attacks that often trigger some of the defensiveness and resistance that I think often makes that additional level of complication when we're dealing with remote teams. The second strategy that I wanted to suggest was how to address microaggressions, or those subtle power plays that people can sometimes do. In remote environments, this can mask subtle but quite damaging behaviors like withholding information or deliberately delaying responses or undermining other people in your team, whether it's in an email thread or in a group chat or something like this. And it's easy to let these things slide when you're in a remote setting, but this often contributes to the build-up of quite a negative culture. So instead of ignoring these signs of subtle power plays, so to speak, what can be more effective is naming the dynamic, not the drama. So I've noticed that in the last thread in our team chat, you corrected Sam publicly. Could we agree that we're going to give feedback in private when it's not urgent? So again, I'm quite specific about the behavior, and I'm also specific about what they've done. The focus here should be about developing team norms, not personal criticism. So the third strategy to consider is how to use the medium to your advantage. Ironically, I think remote teams can often help us to de-escalate conflict as opposed to being there in person, even if this benefit comes unintentionally. For example, what's sometimes called asynchronous communication, like I send you a message and I don't get a reply in real time, this can be quite helpful to avoid the build-up of heat in that moment-to-moment interaction. And if a thread gets tense, like an email train all of a sudden becomes quite conflict ridden, what can be helpful is to take it offline. Like, could we set up a Zoom call to clarify things? It sounds like we're coming at this situation from different perspectives. That makes sense given the different focus in our roles. Could we organize a time to get on the same page moving forward? So we're just naming the situation. I think there might be a misunderstanding, or maybe we're misreading things here. Could we jump on a quick call to clarify? Now, depending on your team and the culture that you're working in, that could be more formal or less formal, but the focus is on shifting towards the future and on the solutions rather than getting stuck in the past and the problems. So conflict resolution doesn't have to feel flat. You don't necessarily need to, go and start a big battle with someone. It's often just about addressing issues in a proactive kind of way. So difficult people don't necessarily disappear just because they're on mute, but I hope that has been helpful for you, just thinking about some of those strategies to focus on the behavior instead of the personality, calling out the subtle tension and those power plays when they happen, and considering some of the benefits that remote tools ironically bring. If you'd like more additional resources and tools for dealing with conflict, please consider pressing subscribe. And if it's been useful, I would love it if you'd consider pressing like. And finally, what do you find helpful for managing conflict in remote teams that you're dealing with? If you'd be willing to leave a comment below, that would be useful for other people as well. Thank you very much. See you next time.